This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service. Manx Radio! I have to admit that far too often I can be heard declaring that something is a miracle, like getting a parking space when I'm really short of time, or finding the most beautiful jumper that's been marked down to a ridiculously low price and it's my size. What I really mean, of course, is that something has worked out unexpectedly well. But this morning I offer you the true story of a real miracle. A young man seriously injured in the First World War, cured dramatically of epilepsy, paralysis of the right arm and paraplegia. The healing happened when John Traynor, or Jack as he was known to family and friends, was taken on a pilgrimage, the first such group to go from Liverpool in 1923 to Lourdes in the Pyrenees region of France, the place where an apparition who was Mary, the Mother of God, came to a 14-year-old peasant girl called Bernadette and told her to encourage people to come there to wash in the stream of water flowing from the rock on which the apparition stood. The stream of water has never dried up. Hundreds of thousands of people from around the world go to Lourdes each year. Many go into the baths there and are immersed in the spring water, as did Jack Traynor over 100 years ago. What happened to him is what we're going to hear after this hymn, which was sung in the Roman Catholic Cathedral of Christ the King in Liverpool last Tuesday night at a Mass to celebrate the official proclamation of the miraculous healing of Jack Traynor at Lourdes. Tell out my soul the greatness of the Lord, and it surely was the greatness of the Lord being celebrated in the cathedral in Liverpool earlier this week. But we were celebrating something that happened in 1923, over 100 years ago. And we wouldn't be celebrating at all were it not for the hard work and persistence of one man. He is Dr. Kieran Moriarty, a physician with a distinguished career in various fields of medicine, who I met and talked with in Liverpool last Tuesday afternoon. First of all, Dr. Moriarty explained why the story of Jack Traynor's healing was so important to him, even though it happened about 30 years before he was born.
I was brought up with this cure from the age of about 8. That's about 65 years ago. My grandparents were on Liverpool Lime Street Station on the 28th of July 1923 when John Traynor returned cured from Lourdes. So I was brought up with that.
Like Dr. Moriarty's grandparents, anyone who was alive in Liverpool in the 1920s who saw Jack Traynor after his return from Lourdes knew that he'd been miraculously healed, because they knew that he was almost at the point of death when he went. But why has there never been an official declaration by the Church? Well, it's because the Church is understandably very, very reluctant ever to declare that a miraculous healing has taken place. There are strict procedures to follow. A number of independent doctors have to separately review all the medical evidence, and some years have to go by to make sure that the cure is permanent and complete. You'll hear all about that as Dr. Moriarty first of all tells Jack Traynor's story, and then how 101 years later it has finally been declared a miraculous healing, a healing that was absolutely outside and above the forces of nature. I'm sure you will realise as you listen to Dr. Moriarty how deeply moved he is in the telling of this story.
Jack Traynor, he was a war hero. On the 8th of October 1914, he was carrying a wounded officer to safety and he was hit with shrapnel in his head. He had that removed. He went back to the forces, Dublin Fusiliers, and then on the 8th of May 1915 at Gallipoli, he was wounded severely in the chest and the arm, and the wounds in the arm completely destroyed the nerves to his right arm, so his right arm was left paralysed. He had 4 operations. The first one was conducted by Sir Frederick Treves, who was very famous because he was the doctor who cared for the Elephant Man, Joseph Merrick, at my old hospital, the London Hospital, and he was the best surgeon of his day, and it didn't work. 3 further operations didn't help. On the ship back from Alexandria in 1915, he had his first epileptic fit. So he got back to Liverpool with paralysis of his right arm and having epileptic fits. Between 1915 and 1920, as well as the 4 operations, he saw 10 doctors and had 16 operations. His epileptic fits became more and more serious, and Dr. McMurray operated on his head to remove a piece of skull, supposedly to relieve the pressure, but there was no basis for that, and in fact it made him worse. He was left paralysed in both legs. He just continued to deteriorate between 1920 and 23. He was meant to be admitted to Moseley Hill Hospital for the incurables on the 24th of July 1923, but he jumped the gun, and on the 22nd of July he went to Lourdes on the first Liverpool Archdiocesan pilgrimage to Lourdes. On the train journey there, he was so ill that they stopped the train on 3 occasions to consider taking him off. They thought he might die, but in fact there was no hospital there, so they carried on to Lourdes. When he was in Lourdes, he had 9 baths. In the 9th bath, he started to feel his legs moving a little. They took him immediately from the bath to the Blessed Sacrament procession, and he was blessed by the Archbishop of Rheims, and at that time he burst the bandages on his right arm. He went back to the hospital where he was. The documentation was excellent because the 3 Liverpool doctors, Dr. Azurdia, Dr. Marley and Dr. Finn, examined John, or Jack as he was known to his family, on the 24th of July before he was cured, immediately after he was cured on the 25th, and again on the 27th of July. There was never better documentation. John Traynor had 5 medical conditions from which he was eventually cured. While he was in Lourdes, he was cured from the paralysis of his legs, and the most dramatic aspect of his cure was on the morning of the 26th of July, after he had the blessing at the Blessed Sacrament procession. He left his bed And in his night clothes, he ran barefoot to the grotto to give thanks to Our Lady. As you can imagine, there was consternation around the place. So, of the 5 medical conditions while he was in Lourdes, he was cured of his epilepsy. He never had a fit again after he'd been in Lourdes. The paralysis was cured, and he also had very nasty bed sores from the paralysis and a sore on his arm, and they all healed up instantly. His right arm gradually improved, the muscles slowly grew back, and he also had a hole in his skull, and you could see the brain through the skull. That gradually healed up. He was examined in Lourdes on the 7th of July 1926 by a group of 6 doctors, including Dr. Vallée, who was the acting permanent doctor at the Lourdes Bureau of Medical Observations, and the 3 Liverpool doctors were all there again. So again, it was excellent documentation, and they documented all of the findings, and they also documented that his arm had virtually recovered. But John had a completely paralysed arm, that he had been advised to have it amputated on a number of occasions. And this was a man who, his arm had, the muscles had grown back, the sensation had returned, and he was able to work as a coal merchant, lifting bags of coal up to the weight of 200 pounds, 90 kilograms. This was clearly medically inexplicable. So he was cured from 5 different conditions. The problem with the cure was that there were no cures referred from Lourdes to diocesan bishops between 1913 and 1946. Now, the doctors in Lourdes documented that they thought in 1926 that this was a medically inexplicable cure, but it has to go to the diocesan bishop, who is the person who recognises the cure as miraculous, and it never went to Liverpool. That was the problem. I actually first went to Lourdes in 1971 as a medical student, and that's when I first realised that the cure had never been recognised as medically inexplicable. I have to say, it did just cross my mind then that maybe I might one day be able to do something about it. And also, there'd never been a cure from England or Wales. In fact, of the first 70 miraculous cures from Lourdes, 69 have been from continental Europe and 1 from Algeria. This is the first one, the 71st one from the rest of the world. I was appointed as a member of the Lourdes Medical International Committee in 2004. I did start to look at the documentation in more detail. In 2006, I looked at his dossier, and there was very little in it, and I concluded that there wasn't enough medical information to recognise a cure. So I did write to Archbishop Kelly at that time and say that. I looked again in 2018, and again there didn't seem to be the documentation. Dr. Alessandro Di Franciscus, the permanent doctor in Lourdes, in August 1923, he asked me to look at the documentation again in recognition of the 100th anniversary of the first Liverpool pilgrimage. I looked with a fairly heavy heart because I didn't think I'd find much, but I did notice for the very first time there was reference to this document by Dr. Vallée and the other doctors in 1926. So we got that document out. It was in French. We had it translated into English, and it was clear then that there was enough evidence to look into it further. So I came to Liverpool Archdiocesan Archives in September of 2023, where I was helped considerably by Neil Sayre, the excellent archivist, and I found further documentation, excellent documentation, to support Dr. Vallée's report in 1926. I produced a narrative primarily for Archbishop McMahon to help to explain the other aspects of the documentation, and I was going to present it to the Lourdes International Medical Committee in October 1923. I then became very ill with an infected heart valve, and I appreciated that as there was a significant mortality from this, the case might die with me. So I persuaded the nurses and Dr. D. Franciscus to let me present it by Zoom from my hospital. The nurses thought I was quite mad, and to be honest, I was so ill I don't remember anything of the presentation, and I thought I'd blown it. But Dr. D. Franciscus and Monsignor Mikas, who's the Bishop of Tardwen, have always been very supportive throughout, and Dr. D. Franciscus said, get the documentation together again, and I did for July 2024. Archbishop McMahon took this on board, and he convened a canonical commission on the 29th of November of 2024. I appeared as a witness at it, and Dr. D. Franciscus appeared online. I was interviewed for about an hour. They were all very supportive, went into all the details, and then Archbishop McMahon invited me back into the room, and he told me that he was going to declare it a miracle. You can perhaps imagine this had been in my heart for 65 years. They then had a Mass on December the 8th in Liverpool Christ the King Cathedral, and Canon Prescott, on behalf of Archbishop McMahon, read the statement of the declaration. I was there with the Traynor family. It was a wonderful celebration, and now we come to today, and again, it's a wonderful celebration.
And I am so very grateful to you. It's an incredible story, but it is very emotionally charged for you, and wonderful that for all those people involved, you could bring us to this day. That thought that you had as a young medical student, you never let it go, did you?
No. I don't know whether I'll be able to get the last bit out, but when I was waiting to go into the commission, I was thinking of the words of St. John Henry Newman, that each of us has been given a special task in life, a unique task, just for oneself. And I thought this was mine.
It most certainly is. And you didn't fail. Doctor, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take me, Lord, use my life in the way you wish to do. Fill me, Lord, touch my heart till it always thinks of you. Take me now as I am. This is all I can offer. Here today, I, the clay, will be molded by my Lord. Lord, I pray that each day I will listen to your will. Many times I have failed, but I know you love me still. Teach me now, guide me, Lord, keep me close to you always. Here today, I, the clay, will be molded by my Lord. I am weak, fill me now with your strength and set me free. Make me whole, fashion me so that you will live in me. Hold me now in your hands, pour me out your spirit. Here today, I, the clay, will be molded by my Lord.
Take me, Lord, use my life in the way you wish to do. a hymn of service sung at the Mass in the cathedral on Tuesday evening, proclaiming the miraculous healing of Jack Traynor at Lourdes, the first English person ever to be recognised. The Mass was celebrated by Archbishop Malcolm McMahon, leader of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Liverpool, which includes the Isle of Man.
Hello, Judith. It's great to see you again. Thank you for coming over from the Isle of Man to Liverpool. Yeah, it is a very special day for the whole of Liverpool, really, as well as the Catholic Church here and the Archdiocese, which, as you know, goes far beyond Liverpool, even over to the Isle of Man.
This is a significant year for the Roman Catholic Church, isn't it?
Every 25 years or so in the Church, following a biblical tradition, Old Testament tradition, we have a Jubilee year where we pause, where we step off the escalator, off the conveyor belt, and we take stock of our lives. We forgive those who have caused us harm, and we hope that they have the grace to forgive us too. And it's like starting again, pressing a reset button. Pilgrims of Hope is the theme that the Holy Father's given us for this Jubilee year. So I think something like confirmation of Jack's cure really does fill ordinary people with hope, because times are not easy for most people now. We know that, even though we're living in what appears to be a very affluent age. There's lots of poverty, lots of deprivation around. So to have this little affirmation, because of old evidence that has come to the fore, we're able to declare Jack's cure a miracle, and that is for us a very powerful sign of hope. Best wishes to all the people on the Isle of Man. I hope it won't be too long before I'm there again.
Jack Traynor went to Lourdes on the first ever pilgrimage from Liverpool, and those annual pilgrimages continue to this day, and always have a good number of people from the Isle of Man as part of them. Father Grant Maddock has a special part to play in their smooth running.
I'm the current director of the Lourdes pilgrimage, started 2 years ago.
And the Lourdes pilgrimage from Liverpool has always been a big thing, hasn't it, the Archdiocesan pilgrimage?
It has. There's a real culture around the Lourdes pilgrimage. You know, our young people, our assisted pilgrims, parishes bring groups year on year. And we always end up with quite a sizable crowd of people there. It's like mini Liverpool abroad, really, you know?
It started as an essentially Roman Catholic shrine, didn't it? But now it is a place of pilgrimage for people of all faiths and no faith.
Absolutely. I mean, you do see people of every walk of life, and as you say, every faith, and not just Christian. You see people who are interested in exploring their own faith and that which is sacred, you know, that whole idea of pilgrimage and walking that sacred space and being aware of the presence of God in our lives is what people encounter there. A little bit of heaven is experienced in that space, and that's an aspiration for all of us, isn't it? You know, to be able to gaze upon heaven's shores and one day meet the Lord face to face is just part of who we are as human beings. It's that inner spiritual quest that is the soul looking for meaning, isn't it, you know?
Miracles of acceptance, miracles of reconciliation, they happen all the time, don't they?
Oh, they do. And one of the greatest things we always say is the greatest miracle is that inner transformation where people arrive troubled, wearied, overburdened, carrying other people's stories even to that place. And when they leave, the smile that radiates from their faces, the sense of calm, the knowledge that God is with them, has alleviated so many of those worries, so many of those burdens that you see them arrive in Lourdes with. And it's wonderful to see that contentment as God does what God alone can do to the inner part where we need God to speak to us, you know, when no one else can actually touch that worry, that fret, that anxiety that we are carrying. And there we know that God has actually just lifted, carried us, raised us up on eagle's wings, as the lovely psalm goes.
And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand.
It's that sense of being held and a sense of being seen. You know that you're understood, and as you said a few minutes ago, where people find acceptance, but you know that God accepts all that is weak about you. And there somehow a deeper sense of security is given back to your humanity. And that's God's greatest gift. We're created in his image and likeness after all. But the beauty of therefore being seen and held by God and in God's gaze makes life safe again.
Father Grant Maddox, thank you very much for talking to me. Thank you for all you do to get people to Lourdes.
Oh, thanks, Judith. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand.
And I too have lived all my life with the reality of the miraculous healing of Jack Traynor. Born in the late 1890s, my grandmother was a contemporary of Jack Traynor, and she and her family lived just a couple of streets away from the Traynor family. She knew him after his healing, and after he started his haulage and coal merchant's business, he regularly delivered my grandmother's coal order to the house into which I was eventually born in the 1950s. My grandmother, a woman of great faith, often reminded me of the story and pointed out the house where the family lived. Curiously, we never asked if the church had officially declared it to be a miracle, because we all knew that it was. Tuesday night was, for me, and I think for many of the people who packed into the Cathedral of Christ the King in Liverpool, the moment to share this great story with a world so very much in need of a sign of hope that the world alone just cannot give.
And hold you in the palm of his hand.
And now let's see what's on this week's notice board. Bagarrow Chapel on the main road just outside Kirkmichael invite you to an animal blessing service this afternoon at 2:30. All creatures great and small and their owners will be made very welcome, and the preacher is Reverend Brian Yardy. There are more events under the moon as the Museum of the Moon art installation in the Cathedral in Peel enters its final week with us. Tonight it's Luke Under the Moon as pioneer minister Reverend Alex Brown delivers a one-man presentation of St Luke's Gospel. It's free and open to all. Free tickets are available through Eventbrite, but I think at this point you'd be safe to just go along to the cathedral tonight at 7:30. The Tallis Consort will be singing Under the Moon tomorrow, Monday evening. On Tuesday evening at 7:30, Paul Costain is using his lifetime's experience as a farmer to share his thoughts and experiences on the theme of nature's lunar rhythm. Again, it's free admission and all are welcome. And there's an Any Questions with 3 panellists who've all got connections to space and the moon. Reverend Dr. Joe Heaton, Howard Parkin and Gwyn Jones, with Charles Farger in the chair. That's 7:30 on Wednesday the 26th. Moving away from the cathedral now, on Friday the 28th, in the Abbey Church Hall in Ballasalla, there's coffee and chat from 10 until 12 noon, followed by Friday soup lunch. Homemade with bread, fruit and chocolate. This will be the last Friday soup, and then the Lent lunches will start in the Abbey Church Hall in Ballasalla on the 11th of March. But I'll remind you about that and all the other Lent lunches around the island nearer to the date. There's lots of things happening next Saturday, March the 1st. A coffee morning with raffle and cake stall in Baldrine Methodist Church, open from 10:30 until 12 noon. Then there's Glenmay Chapel's Craft Market, open next Saturday from 11 a.m. until 4 at Glenmay Chapel and Community Centre. Homemade produce and handicrafts, everything by local artists, as well as homemade light lunches, bacon baps, tea, coffee and cakes on sale. Entry is free, just head for Glenmay and look out for the bunting and the banners. Orrisdale Chapel have a coffee morning next Saturday the 1st with Pauline at the portable piano. It opens at 10:30. Admission is free, but donations for the upkeep of the chapel building would be much appreciated. And finally, looking forward to next Sunday, March the 2nd, Ballafesson Methodist Chapel in Port Erin have a Welsh hymn service next Sunday morning at 10:30, led by Reverend Chris Belfield. And also next Sunday, the Mariners Choir will be in Kirk Christ. Russian Parish Church for a service starting at 6:30, at which Reverend Canon Joe Heaton will preach. And as usual, it'll be followed by supper and community hymn singing. And that's all that we have time for now, but I'll be back tonight at 9, waiting to open the door to our virtual lounge and welcome you in for a mix of all kinds of music, plus your requests and dedications. And I'd love you to join me if you can. And so, until whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a safe, happy and peaceful week, and a very good morning.